Did Warren Buffett just bet on the chip industry? When the quarterly filing of a giant company with $684 billion of stock in holdings reports a huge number of shorted stock, that spells trouble. On the 14th of November, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway submitted the official report of the holdings of the company to the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC. This report includes many surprises. What are the stocks Warren Buffett is buying? Which stocks did he sell? What does this mean for the general market trend? Join us as we discuss the stock Warren Buffett adds to his portfolio and the others he's currently selling off. Remember that in January 2022, Microsoft announced a $68.7 billion acquisition deal for the video game publisher Activision Blizzard for $95 per share. At the time, the investors in Berkshire had no idea Buffett's company had purchased nearly $1 billion worth of Activision Blizzard shares, or ATVI for short, at an average price of about $77. This deal was done just a few weeks before the $68 billion acquisition was completed. So, with ATVI still well below their buyout price of $95, Berkshire had already sold more than 8.2 million shares in the third quarter, rewarding Warren Buffett's merger arbitrage bet. But the billionaire investor still has his finger on the pulse, holding 60.1 million shares of ATVI stock, currently worth around $4.5 billion. But that's not even the big news. Warren Buffett has invested in many sectors of the economy over the last 50 years of his life as a hyper-successful businessman. So anyone that keeps an eye on his investments knows Warren Buffett has had a long history of huge bets on bank stocks. But in the first quarter of 2022, Berkshire finally sold off the last of its remaining shares of Wells Fargo & Co. This move was taking place after more than 20 years of holding the stock. Currently, the longest-running bank stock holding at Berkshire Hathaway is US Bancorp. It was in 2006 that Warren Buffett first invested in US Bancorp, but the third quarter filing reports that the veteran investor has cut down his stake by 31%. Buying the bank shares has been a classic value investment, trading at a forward earnings multiple of just 8.7. Still, Berkshire holds more than 53 million shares, worth more than $2.2 billion. Not even the Bank of New York Mellon has been spared. The Bank of New York Mellon boasts of a unique business model as a trust bank, which includes managing cash for large investment funds, providing day-to-day funding for mega corporations, and serving as a fixed income clearing firm. So they generate revenue not by taking on credit risk by aggressive lending. Instead, the bank generates much of its income from transaction fees. It was in the third quarter of 2010 that Warren Buffett first invested in the bank's stock, but in the quarterly filings, we realized that the billionaire had reduced his stake by 14%. Even after shorting the stock, Berkshire still holds about 62.2 million shares, currently worth around $2.4 billion. Did you know that Berkshire now owns 13% of Paramount Global? This is the entertainment company that was formed by the merger of Viacom and CBS in 2019. Berkshire increased its stake in Paramount by 16% in the third quarter to more than 91.2 million shares, worth about $1.7 billion. But as for people who watch the equities Warren Buffett buys and sells, you would be pleased to find out about the fact that Warren Buffett now has his radar on the chip industry. The chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway have just indicated a sizable new interest in Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing, also known as TSM. This is the largest pure-play semiconductor foundry in the world recently, and it just had 60.1 million of its shares purchased by Warren Buffett's holding company. It would seem that this is the most recent addition to the portfolio of Berkshire Hathaway. TSM has risen to the 10th largest stake for Berkshire Hathaway, with a value of $4.1 billion as of the end of Q3. According to a filing with the regulatory authorities on November 14th, Buffett made the purchases during the third quarter. Although TSM is a key supplier of semiconductors for the global supply chain, it has seen the value of its stock plummet this year as investors worry about waning demand and rising competition. The TSM shares were down by some 39.5% year-to-date amid a weak global semiconductor market. This comes as a result of the announcement from the US Department of Commerce implementing new restrictions on advanced chip sales to China. This geopolitical tension of uncertainty has presented a buying opportunity for investors with a knack for a recourse. The size of Warren Buffett's wager in the chip market is rather unexpected. One example is that he has recently put a lot of effort into increasing exposure to companies in the energy industry like Occidental Petroleum and Chevron. And even though Apple, with a weighting of 42%, is by far the largest holding in Berkshire Hathaway's equity portfolio, only 6 of the holding company's 48 equities and 2 ETFs are in the technology sector. Occidental Petroleum Corporation has repaid Buffett's faith in them by being one of the top market performers in 2022. The CEO of Berkshire Hathaway has held a stake in the oil and gas company since Berkshire assisted Occidental's $38 billion takeover of Anadarko Petroleum back in 2019. Since then, Berkshire's stake in Occidental has grown to more than 194.4 million shares that are worth about $11.9 billion. Berkshire also holds 83.9 million warrants that can be redeemed for Occidental Petroleum common stock at $59.62 per share. As for the other U.S. oil major, Chevron, it was in the final quarter of 2020 that Warren Buffett invested in the oil giant. But in the first and second quarters of 2021, the billionaire began to limit his exposure to the volatile oil market. That turned out to be short-lived. Following the US energy crisis and the Russo-Ukrainian conflict, crude oil prices soared to 13-year highs in 2022 alone. The chairman and CEO has now added to his Chevron investment in the first and second quarters, and in the third quarter, buying up more than 3.9 million shares. This brings the total stake up to 165.4 million shares that are currently worth about $23.8 billion. But ultimately, Berkshire Hathaway continued to be a net stock buyer during the quarter. According to the company's quarterly report, Berkshire Hathaway purchased around $3.6 billion worth of stock in the third quarter. Keep in mind that such net purchases occurred even though finding deals were typically more difficult. Ultimately, the S&P 500 declined 5.3% in terms of price during the third quarter. But at one point in mid-August, the benchmark index had increased by about 14% since the end of the second quarter. In any case, Warren Buffett's most recent quarter was marked by greater greed than fear, as evidenced by Berkshire Hathaway's Q3 net buying, which was consistent with its Q2 behavior. Third quarter net purchasing was indeed far below how Warren Buffett started the year, but that was in a different market. Buffett's biggest equity spending binge since early 2008 totaled a whopping $41.5 billion in net stock purchases during Berkshire Hathaway's first quarter purchasing frenzy. However, at one point in the first quarter, the S&P 500 had lost more than 12% of its value. That probably made it simpler for Buffett to locate discounted stocks. It's also true that Berkshire Hathaway's first quarter binge was partially funded by energy juggernaut Chevron, a proud member of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The purchase of 5.8 million shares in Louisiana-Pacific, a manufacturer of home components, was among the additional new third-quarter investments. The position, valued at $297 million as of the third quarter's conclusion, is tiny enough that it might have been created by any of the co-portfolio managers, assuming you're the kind of person to call $200 million tiny. In any case, Berkshire Hathaway purchased over 430,000 shares for about $13 million from Jefferies Financial Group, or JEF. This initiated a minor interest in the investment bank. Similar to LPX, less than 0.1% of Berkshire Hathaway's overall portfolio value is represented by the holding JEF. Could Warren Buffett have been the one that chose this stock? Berkshire Hathaway also increased its stake in Celanese, Paramount Global, and RH, also known as Restoration Hardware. Berkshire Hathaway has completely liquidated its holdings in the real estate investment trust Store Capital, selling the remaining 6.9 million shares. So what can we say about the TSM stake? One thing we know for sure is that it is a ballsy move. Taiwan alone produces over 90% of the raw material that the world's technology is heavily dependent on, and TSM happens to be one of the biggest chip companies in Taiwan. It would seem that it was a rare opportunity to buy shares of the company so cheaply. On the other hand, it could be a failed investment if the Chinese government takes over Taiwan and its industries. Thanks for watching this video. Let us know what you think of Warren Buffett's stocks in the comments section down below.